Hello there, I'm Alyssa Olenek, scientist, exercise enthusiast, weightlifter, outdoors lover, and entrepreneur. I believe that the extremes in the fitness and wellness industries are leaving way too many of us out of the conversation, not telling us the knowledge that we actually need to succeed in our health, our wellness, our nutrition, and quite frankly, our lives. They end up giving us black and white polarizing messages that leave us more confused than giving us the answers that we need. Through my 10 years of studying exercise science, metabolism, and female physiology, as well as exploring the outdoors and being a fitness athlete myself, I'm here to bring to you the conversations that need to be had in an industry that often is too far focused on extremes. So if you join me on this podcast, I truly believe that life is best lived in the messy middle. Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Messy Middle Podcast. Today I want to talk to you about something that I don't think a lot of people think about when it comes to combining strength training and running. And what I think is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see runners doing when they start adding lifting to their program, especially when they're trying to lift through the race prep or race training or going all the way to the race while including lifting and not kind of abandoning it like we do in the past. So first off, wherever you're listening to this, if you could stop and subscribe on the YouTube and or whatever podcast listening platform you use, and if you have the ability to rate or leave a comment, do so as well. It helps so much. It's a free way to give back if you appreciate the content that I'm doing. And if you really love the content and extra appreciate me, you'll go over to YouTube if you're coming from a podcast platform and just hit subscribe there as well. It tells the YouTube gods that you like me, as well as the podcast gods, wherever they are at. So if you find this information helpful, you like the show, you want to learn more, go ahead and rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever it is. Let the world know that you are here for the Messy Middle Podcast. Now, back to today's topic. So when it comes to combining lifting and running, whether it's hybrid training, concurrent training, or you're just a runner who's trying to lift for whatever reason, hopefully you are, one of the biggest complaints that I get from so many of you or people in general is that you're always fatigued, sore, tired, and you just feel like lifting is like just causing you way more problems than good, and you don't know how to manage the two together. And so this is the big reason why I'm an ebook like hybrid, or you've heard me talk about before. I take this thing called the seasons approach. And so first off, we have to think about the season that you're in when you're combining the running and lifting. If you're in an early race prep season, you're probably going to be able to do more lifting versus your running. But as you carry out through closer to your race, you're probably going to have to adjust the amount of lifting that you're doing. What I see many people do is they change the style of lifting they're doing as well. So what they do is they have heavy legs, sore legs, tired legs, fatigued legs. And what they do to manage that is either they just stop lifting, they skip it altogether, and hey, if that's what you need to do to get through your run training season as long as you're active, that's totally okay. But if you're trying to sustain it and manage that balance, as we like to call it, I prefer the word for me, across your race training seasons, blocks, whatever that is, I think that we need to start really thinking about what our lifting is doing and not trying to make our lifting running. And what do I mean by that? So really old school conventional running and lifting advice is to lower the intensity. So drop your RPE to like a 5 or something lower. Keep it really easy breezy. Do a ton of reps and maybe extra sets because if you're doing this. And you're doing this with either just body weight or banded or really light work so it doesn't cause you more fatigue or carry over into your running to cause more of that leg soreness or heaviness that we all hate when we're on our runs. And so what happens is that when you start to up the reps and sets, you end up inadvertently doing more volume, or you're not following the structured training program and you're doing different exercises every single week and you're doing these high rep body weight things or banded things, tons of reps, tons of sets, all of this stuff, changing it up every week, and you're still feeling frustrated because you're always sore or fatigued or whatever it is. Or if you're someone who comes from a better, bigger weightlifting background or bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever it is, you're trying to hold on to the same style of training that you do during heavy lifting seasons, during the run training seasons, and you're not adjusting your running, your lifting volume, to accommodate the increase in your running volume, especially if running is a new stimulus to you and you haven't quite adapted to that and increased your kind of general ceiling of what you can handle in a training program at the same time. And so why is this? Why do we not want to do high rep, like a high set, running, mimicking, working out? Like, wouldn't that make sense that we kind of should have our lifting match or be sport specific to our running? And why can't we sustain our high volume lifting phases across our running goals? And let me explain to you why. So when it comes to these things, we're increasing our volume, and volume management is going to be one of the number one ways to reduce and prevent injuries, whether that's running volume or lifting volume, all of the above. Managing how much volume is in your training program is going to be one of the best ways to, one, prevent injuries, but also manage recovery and fatigue. So I'm not here saying you're all going to go get injured, but when we think about combining running and lifting, what a lot of people do is they just take their running or their lifting and they slap the other one on top of it, and they just start adding all this volume rather than adjusting the one versus the other. And we're going across a race training season, and you're not kind of doing that build up where you're gradually building up, but like you're kind of really climbing in that mileage or the intensity as you get closer to that big day. What you're doing is increasing your running volume, your running intensity. And so while you may be able to sustain a pretty good amount of lifting volume with your running in that early preseason, if you want to call it that, if you want to get really sports specific, because it's not too much. You're just increasing your overall volume, but you've kind of been taking it easy in an off season, so to speak, or a strength only season. You're kind of able to maintain both for a while. But eventually at one point or another, something's got to give. And so managing volume when it comes to hybrid or concurrent training means you have to factor your lifting in your running. I talk about this all the time, and I talk about this extensively in my ebook Hybrid. And so people tend to just slap things on top of each other, or they don't consider their general fitness status going into it. So someone who's less fit can handle less of both, and someone who's more fit, who's been doing this for years, has built up their ceiling of capacity, how much volume they can handle at once of not only each but both together. And so they can do more. So you have to consider that within this, but managing that volume is going to be key. And one of the ways that we can do that and manage the volume is to honestly lift heavier and decrease how many reps that we're doing. I know that sounds silly because you're like, well, you're lifting more weight. Isn't that more fatiguing? Isn't that more difficult? But let me explain to you why. So if you were doing, 4 sets of 10, we'll use 10 as an example, even though 10 isn't that high of a number, but I don't know if I can do that kind of math on the fly right now on the podcast. You're doing 4 sets of 10 at 100 pounds. So you do the math. Your total volume for these back squats that you're doing is 4 by 10, which is 400, times 100 pound is 4,000. So 4,000 pounds, the total volume that you did in that lifting session, right? Now, let's do 4 by 5. Let's keep my math easy for myself. So 4 by 5, 20 times 100 pounds, that's 2,000. That if I did my math wrong, I hope you guys are not judging me at home. I have a PhD, but I don't have the brain capacity for this. So close enough. So the difference between those two total volumes of those workouts is 4,000 pounds versus 2,000 pounds. Do you see where we're doing that math there and that makes that difference? So doing higher volume might be harder to recover from. It might be more fatiguing, or it might just be a lot on top of whatever other volume you're doing when it comes to your cross training, whether it's running, cycling, whatever else it is. But a really easy way to reduce that volume while still prioritizing strength and maintaining intensity across your running training season within your lifting is to simply stick in the strength ranges. It's a common misconception that runners need to be doing like 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 reps in their accessory work in order to mimic running, but you don't need to make your lifting so sport specific. You're doing running in your running. Let your running be your running, right? You're doing tons of high rep, like low weight, constant impact type stuff in your running. Let that be there. But the low rep, high weight stuff in your lifting will not only allow you to maintain strength, power, and your overall like general strength capacity, but also help you maintain muscle across your running season, assuming your nutrition's lined up enough. You don't need high volumes of lifting to maintain your lifting. And remember, if you've ever heard me talk about anything hybrid in the past, the goal when you're focusing on running more than lifting or lifting more than running is to maintain the other one. If you're trying to build up your hybrid capacity or hybrid volume over time, or trying to maintain whatever one is in the main focus, not lose, but maintain, so then you can build again and build again and build again. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see me raising my hands in like an incremental step. If you're on the podcast, you can just picture me doing that. And so what we are able to do is maintain our strength and maintain that stimulus to our bodies to maintain muscle, as well as keeping us strong, capable, and resilient when it comes to our running goals. Now, you don't have to lift and run at the same time. If you want to be good at running, you're going to have to run. But if you're doing these both together, it's more advantageous for you to do low reps and high weight for that. So I like to personally say between a 3 to 6 range. You can do 1 to 6. Some of you don't want to do singles or don't want to program that, but sticking in that range of strength, so 1 to 6 or 3 to 6, depending on what your goals are, is a great way to manage volume. And you can do probably anywhere between like 2 to 5 sets, depending on how much you can personally handle and recover from in your strength training history. while still keeping and using RPEs to manage that fatigue that might be coming over from your running as the volume's increasing. So you're still getting benefits from your lifting. And so that is going to be one of the biggest things, is just managing that volume within your training. And then you do the math and you think about it, you're like, that makes sense. You can still get a really strong, robust strength stimulus by doing those high, heavy sets, right? And those might feel like they're going to be harder, more fatiguing. And it's kind of contradictory, because when it comes to concurrent training or mixing running, lifting, hybrid training, the neuromuscular fatigue is one of the biggest things that you do see. So those high end power outputs, when it comes to that really snappy speed strength type stuff, or your like high percentage work when, in the gym, might be the thing that starts to slow down the most. But we want to try to sustain that as best as we can. And all you can do if that starts to happen when your volume is really high, when you're really close to your race, is just to drop the weight according to your RPE. And that's why we love using RPE. You might want to stick around a 7 more than an 8 when it comes to your race training, just to manage that a little bit more in that intensity, so you're not overdoing it all the time if you feel like it's harder. But if you use RPE across that, they'll also account for volume as well, because if you have to drop the weight because it feels heavier than you really would originally perceive it when you're not in a heavy endurance training season, the volume will be adjusted for you just by using RPE. So we have to keep that in mind, that RPE kind of does account for these things as well within our training. Now, this also ties into the goal of a lot of people, is to have novelty and lift something new all of the time and do all these crazy workouts, or they just don't have structure, or they're just doing whatever they can to have some sort of strength alongside their running. And so this is why I recommend following a consistent training program, especially if you're a runner, cyclist, triathlete, endurance athlete, hybrid, whatever you want to call it. Because one of the things that makes us sore, it causes muscle damage and fatigue, more so than almost anything else in our training, is novel exercises, newness in our program. And you've probably noticed this in the past, where you do something new, you do a new workout class, you start a training block, you start lifting again, and you have this increased level of soreness that first week or two. But what happens is, this is called the repeated bout effect. So when you do something more than once, over and over, what happens is your body starts to adapt to it. It goes, I've seen this before, and has less of a strong inflammatory response, which isn't bad. That's part of the healing and soreness response that we want physiologically. But what it says is, we've seen this before, so this isn't as scary, isn't as taxing. You don't have to respond as much to this, which is really, really great. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend you follow a traditional strength program along with your running, and also keeping it consistent week to week. Don't change your exercises, even your accessory work, week to week. And it also might be a reason to opt for a slightly longer blocks, like 5 or 6 weeks, when in a heavy racing or running phase, just so you can mitigate some of that soreness, or keep your movement pattern as similar block to block. So that way it's not completely new. So this would be an example, would be like taking a week, or like taking a month off deadlifts or squats and adding it back in. You're going to be much more sore than if you adjust weight, drop, accommodate to what you can do, and then keep them in your program. So I think a lot of people, what they do is they either change their workouts every week, or they just skip weeks because they can't manage the soreness and fatigue. You are far better off still doing that movement, keeping it in your program, and even dropping the reps or weights or sets, or using RPE, but still doing it so your body's still exposed to that stress, that stimulus. So that way, if you add it back in, you're not totally losing it or having to give up running or lifting earlier than you planned in your race training program. So that's also a great tip for keeping lifting in your race training program all the way up and through your taper. Whenever you decide to remove lifting entirely, that's kind of personal and up to you. But that keeping it so it's similar week to week, and not skipping weeks or skipping moves entirely because of soreness and fatigue, and minimizing that. Now, if you use the work here and there, it's totally okay. But minimizing that will allow you to be able to kind of recover and not be as sore and not be as heavy, and have every single workout not be as fatiguing and taxing week to week to week, so that when you're running and lifting side by side, you can actually handle that volume and recover from it. So that is a great way to manage your soreness while also looking at your volume. So keeping things consistent, doing similar movement patterns on the same ones week to week to week, and managing your volume. Because by doing that, what you're doing is you're keeping your volume managed. You can respond to it, and you know how you're responding to it. So if you're keeping the same workout consistent, as you increase your miles and you start to notice you have more fatigue build up, like the normal fatigue that comes with race training, especially higher mileage race training, and or whatever goals that you have set for yourself, you can kind of look at your volume and say, okay, that's a little bit too much. I think it's time to dial it back a little bit rather than removing it entirely. Or if you have weeks where you feel like you're having a harder time recovering or adjusting, you can adjust that volume instead of removing it entirely or changing things up, so to speak. So you're maintaining that stimulus and it's familiar to your body across your training plan. I know these seems like really silly things, but really that low rep range, high weight, as well as just keeping a consistent training program is going to make a huge difference in managing that fatigue and soreness that you get with your rep training. Now, you definitely need to go back and listen to my podcast or watch the video, I think it has, of my biggest hybrid training mistakes. One of these is definitely going to be tied into nutrition. So those things are definitely going to have a major outcome on this. But when it comes to looking at our training, assuming your nutrition and sleep are all good or as good as they can get, these are two really, really important ways that you can be able to manage doing both of these at the same time, and also consider those increases or adjustments or rising volume or mileage or intensity in your running training while still keeping lifting a part of your program and plan. And this also ties in, my friends, to my bodybuilder, powerlifter friends. All of this information that I just gave also applies to you, but the biggest thing is that you don't need to be doing your high volume work hypertrophy phase or building block when you're increasing running volume or you're in a race training phase. So if running is new to you or endurance is new to you, it might be optimal to, adjust volume and, go to a maintenance volume or something you can tolerate. We know volume is really important for strength gain and hypertrophy, but remember, if you're in a race training goal or you're trying to get better at running, the goal there is to maintain your lifting and increase that endurance capacity. So you might have to slightly drop your volume in your lifting or intensity for a little bit while you let the other one rise up. And then as you adapt, it will kind of force you back and you will kind of be able to balance these things out. So keep your 4x10, 4x12 hypertrophy, high volume phases to your off season, your strength season. But this is also why I love a season's approach, because traditionally I'm more of a strength athlete than I am an endurance athlete. And this gives me a few months every single year or a year phase like I just went through where I can really just focus on that strength and hypertrophy aspect of my training. This doesn't mean that you can't do this kind of stuff, do hypertrophy rep ranges or that kind of work to support your lifting or to maintain your gains. Absolutely do that if you can handle it, especially the upper body stuff. Most of that isn't going to fatigue you too much. But we're really talking about that lower body fatigue management here, keeping your compounds, and doing accessories that can support hypertrophy, but also support your running or endurance goals at the same time, like single leg things, lots of core movement, maybe a little bit more athletic stuff than you might traditionally do in your program, or hopefully you're doing, because we should all train like athletes. So keep that for your off season or your strength focus season. It will come, and I promise you, you will not lose as much as you think you will, as long as you maintain and focus on that as you're increasing these. And then once you get your endurance capacity up or you get to your race, you can kind of switch gears back to more of that focus while still maintaining that fitness that you gained in an endurance focus phase. And that's really this season's approach in a nutshell. So I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you found it beneficial. I know that so many people struggle so much with fatigue and tired legs when it comes to their race training, running, all of this stuff. And these are two really easy ways to adjust your training to kind of remove that novelty or remove the aspect that's making you sore, fatigued, tired all the time, and allow you to keep running, race training, and crushing your goals simultaneously with one another. Now, you're going to have sore legs, you're going to have tired legs, you're going to have days where you're just going to feel that, and it's going to carry from your run into your lift or your lift into your run. My best advice for that is truly just to suck it up. It's going to happen. Give yourself the grace to know that it's okay. And even if things feel harder some days, fatigue's building up, that's part of your training progress. In program, usually good programs are going to have you increase your fatigue and intensity over time and then recover. That's kind of part of what training is, and that you're still making progress, even if some runs and some lifts really feel like you're losing it all. But if you eat, sleep, and manage your volume, like we talked about here today, some magic can truly happen in your concurrent training or hybrid training goals. So if you found this helpful today, you might really enjoy my ebook Hybrid, which talks about this in depth, extensively, managing these things, managing these two together, and factoring in how you should set up your weeks and how many sessions you should do of lifting versus running, which also is a factor of this, depending on how fit you are, your training status, your training age, or what you can manage, as well as other things that go into this. So of course, one podcast or a YouTube video is not all inclusive to all the information, but my ebook Hybrid is actually a chock full, tons of information on that. So you can head to drlessfitness.com/hybrid to get a copy of that. And if you get it, let me know. Tag me at IG. Let me know if you learned something. And if you learned anything from this podcast today, Please let me know and comment below if you're on YouTube, or let me know, tag me on Instagram, share something that you learned, or if you feel a little bit called out, let me know. And I'm so excited for you all to crush your race training goals. I know that managing lifting across race training or increasing endurance can really feel defeating at some points in time, but it's really important to maintain that not only for performance, but also your health. If you need to remove it a few weeks out before your race, that is totally okay. But if you're trying to increase that over time, simply take it and look at your running volume as it is increasing and adjust your lifting volume to do the inverse so you can manage both, you can recover from both, you crush both of your goals at the same time. Thank you for tuning in to the Messy Minute Podcast. I'll catch you guys in the next one.